I'd say Christian morality, but it could be any other morality, right? And a great case for this is like Northern Africa, right? I mean, like, they are not governing themselves in any way appropriately, right? And I think that's pretty objective.
Well, my pet peeve, as an example, is any country that doesn't allow there to be music and orchestras, you know, so that kids can like learn an instrument and play in their high school orchestra and then move on to perhaps professional music as they go. That's a horrible thing, because music, I think, is such an important thing to a society. Imagine Italy without Giuseppe Verdi or Puccini. Yes? You know, that's just wrong, right? But can you have music in Iran? Is music allowed in Iran?
I think religious.
I mean, they play the evening call to prayer, for
Yeah.
sure.
They don't consider that music, though. That's,
No, it's a religious hymn.
it's a religious call.
But it sounds musical. Right.
I've looked up, you know, like the Iran Symphony Orchestra. No, it's haram. It's wrong.
It depends on music. Some music is okay, some music's banned. It's entirely dependent on the music.
Or if they could get away with it. I mean, if you look up, you know, Iranian pop music, there is, but it's also considered sinful. Music is pleasurable, and according to Sharia law, pleasures are sinful. Shouldn't have any pleasures. And music is pleasurable, so it's not allowed, according to at least some imams, as far as I understand. So if we want to promote the idea of music as healthy for the community, healthy for children, healthy for your education, the arts, and not just music, that sounds almost like we're damaging their culture. But is there, as you say, kind of a objective morality that says music is healthy and musically good for you? I mean, your brain is actually functioning musically. You know, there's like a hum in your head if you're thinking in an organized way. If you're autistic and having problems, there's kind of like static. You know, the machine reads instead of a constant, beautiful melody. You've got this going on in the electrical fields, etc. So music seems absolutely part of nature, and yet at the same time, can we say that that's objective, or can we say that that is a cultural moral belief? All good questions, I suppose, but I like living in a place that has an orchestra. That's a little bit different now, because if you're on the internet, you've got music available like crazy, right? Pretty amazing. So I don't know how that goes. I mean, I certainly would like my children and grandchildren to grow up playing music. I think that's really important. If you know, they have the opportunity to do that. So that's kind of interesting. But notice the other issue here is tolerance. So let's go back to Spinoza and see what specifically influenced Locke. The difference was, for Spinoza, in his study of the Torah and his analysis of it, he ends up concluding that the Torah was not written by God. Instead, you have men who are writing the scripture, have a particular audience in mind. So if you're trying to understand what they're writing, you have to understand not only their cultural perspective, their language, their cultural perspective, but also their audience. Who were they trying to write for? And as a result, we treat the Bible, the scripture, as literature written by people, not as written by God. And we have a historical understanding of the development of ideas and an improvement in society from one group or so to the next. So Moses, for example, introducing a law and a set of beliefs is a cultural improvement over what was there before. Jesus is a cultural improvement over what was there before. Einstein, of course, Spinoza doesn't say anything about Einstein because Einstein's not in existence yet. But if you get his drift here, what we're looking at when we're looking at so-called sacred scripture, which we hold in high esteem, but what are we looking at? We're looking at people writing their beliefs and telling people this is what you ought to believe in, and saying that it comes from God. But it's really kind of science as far as it has gone in that particular day. Well, says Spinoza, today science is blossoming. We have Galileo, we have Descartes, we have Thomas Hobbes, we have all these people that are improving our understanding of science. And as a result of that, religious beliefs are going to gradually go away. And instead of hating the different religions that are out there, we should instead be tolerant of those different religions, because they're people just like us. They're people that are also trying to live a life and have families and live peacefully and well. And what we ought to do is realize that all of us are in the same God, and we are all sharing the same goals. And science, now that we've got it moving forward with such new, programs of understanding, is going to eventually persuade everyone, just as Spinoza has been, to give up their religious beliefs and adopt newer, more modern beliefs. So instead of having religious wars, and there were plenty, by the way, in his day, right? Instead of having religious wars, teach everyone science, and eventually we'll all be in unison. Pardon?
Fighting over oil.
Oh, well, let's not go that far.
Economy.
That's a newer problem. He didn't foresee that. Although I should mention that at the time that a lot of people were attracted to the Netherlands was actually an empire at the time, and what made them an empire was wind power. So we think how quaint, all these windmills all over the place. It wasn't just the windmills, but it was also the kinds of ships that they were building. They were very efficient, except for the really big one that they built that sunk as soon as it left the harbor because it was too big. But basically they were building ships. And another interesting thing about the ships that they were building was they also invented insurance. So people could invest in a vessel and its cargo and its eventual return, despite the incredible number of ships that sunk, because there was now insurance. So you could buy insurance on your investment, and you didn't lose everything if the ship sunk. So that was kind of an important part of the Netherlands as well. But so you end up with toleration as a modern moral principle, thanks to Spinoza, as a result of his analysis of the Torah, which of course got him kicked out of the synagogue because they didn't accept his arguments, right? So he's not persuading very many people initially. In fact, it's really a shame. I read one individual that was a follower of Spinoza was literally killed in the street by a crowd where Spinoza was there. The man was killed because he was a follower of Spinoza, and the crowd knew Spinoza was there, and they killed his follower looking at Spinoza, that this is your fault, but they didn't kill Spinoza. So that is really weird. You could look that one up and see if I'm misunderstanding how that all happened. But so, we should be tolerant of other people because we're all in the same God. That's really kind of interesting. God is one, and as a result, all of the universe is God. And if you're killing another human being somewhere, you're harming God. It's not just that you're harming that other individual. You should respect all of God's creation, not just the ones you live in with your family and your nation, but you should be concerned about everyone. So this is a very, very liberal point of view towards other people. And that's what influences John Locke. And so John Locke talks about toleration. Let's see. Isn't there a way for me to... No, I didn't do that right. There it is. I'm not finding it. Shoot. I don't have that much time left. Ooh, what's the quiz question for today? Do you think Spinoza is right that God must be everything? So the argument in the ethics that basically concludes with proposition 14, 15, 16, God is everything. Do you believe Spinoza is right? And by the way, I should have phrased that in a way so that it's not that I'm asking you, do you think God is everything? Does the definition of God that the theologians use imply that God is everything? Is that a better phrasing of it? That seems like a really powerful argument based on what the theologians have. I mean, they attempted to define God as so absolutely absolute that, of course, God must exist, because if God as you conceive of God doesn't exist, well, then something greater exists, and that must be God then by definition. So you can't get out of it by saying, well, that particular idea is not God. Well, no problem, right? So that's the quiz question. And Spinoza gives us toleration for other religions. They're all eventually going to become scientists anyway. So as long as we get them a good enough STEM education, we'll all be, well, I don't know what we'll call ourselves then, right? But we'll all be united in our beliefs, right? And John Locke accepts this as well. And so that's in his work. And one of the things that we know about Thomas Jefferson, and I guess we'll have to do that when we get there next week, or next class rather. is this needs to give us religious freedom and separation of church and state. So there's a direct scholastic line from Spinoza to Locke to Jefferson. And of course, the impact on our country is this, not only the idea of the separation of church and state. Where does that come from? It comes first from law in Virginia. So this is prior to 1774, right? 1776 is when we think of all heck breaking loose in the colonies. So this is prior to the Declaration of Independence. And the argument is primarily aimed at Virginia, which at the time required all office holders, anyone elected to office, had to be a member of the Church of England. And yet there were other churches, and by the way, Jefferson himself was a Unitarian. So strictly speaking, that would have made him not eligible to be in office in Virginia. And so his argument, which won, separated church and state in Virginia. And since that was successful, and by the way, all of the colonies had a particular religious affiliation. So for example, you had the Puritans, you had the Quakers, Pennsylvania. Maryland, named Maryland in honor of Mary, right? Not Mary, Queen of England, but Mary, the Mother of God. So Maryland was a Catholic state, as also Louisiana would be eventually, right? It's not one of the original 13, of course, but that was also a Catholic. Remember, because of the